a PhD student from UC Davis studying correctness and tools to help people write correct floating point code. So excited for the talk. Dolores, do you want to start your talk?
Okay. Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Dolores. I am a doctoral student at UC Davis. I hereby present our work with LNL about isolating the expressions that cause compiler-induced numerical inconsistencies in heterogeneous programs. So compiler-induced numerical inconsistencies are those that, because of the use of different compilers or aggressive compiler optimizations, the result of the computation comes out differently. One such inconsistency we have found during our research was that in the NAS parallel benchmarks in the FPTalks program, where, well, we could see that even though the inconsistencies for individual operations are usually just rounding errors, they can still build up. In this table, you can see that with Clang 03 fast math compared to MVCC 00, like they are already across compilers. Even when the runtime here is like we have like 100% speed up by using 03 and fast math, the maximum relative error in this output is 4 times larger. And this could be a problem in more serious usage situations, because in real-world applications, there are documented cases like the one in CESM, that's the Community Earth System model, where FMA instructions, merely like using FMA instructions, cause QA verifications to fail on one supported platform. And these kind of issues took a lot of development time and effort to even locate, never mind like fixing them. Here are some common causes that we now know of that could cause compiler-induced inconsistencies, such as fast approximation or flush to zero. These are very common causes. We may partially disable optimizations or use higher precision across the board in our programs to resolve them, but it's temporary and usually much slower. So it is best if we can find out the cause of these inconsistencies automatically. We introduced our tool SEAL here, which stands for Compiler-Induced Inconsistency Expression Locator. It analyzes a heterogeneous program, usually containing CPU and CUDA source code. It generates AST and then starts iteratively isolating the code regions, as shown in the AST, that could cause inconsistencies to occur by traversing this AST. It uses precision enhancement, and then it uses differential testing to determine if we say enhancing a certain set of code will resolve the compiler-induced inconsistencies, so that our targeted code regions in the end will narrow down the targeted code regions. And in the end, we will have a minimal step of code that this statement, for example, would be the source of the inconsistencies. First, we talk about the hierarchy extraction module. It traverses through the program source code and generates this AST, grouping statements and basic blocks into a hierarchy. All the statement, basic blocks, and function nodes are organized into a tree, which the tree also keeps track of sibling and adjacency relationship between nodes. For example, basic block 4 and 5 are sibling nodes, and also like they are also adjacent nodes, and this will be useful later on. Next, I will show you how bisection search work. So because we need to isolate code, narrow it down the region of inconsistency further, we need to choose often, for example, in this case, between basic block 1 and 6, as shown in the graph here. So bisection search, what it does is it will split code in 2 halves, and then determine that if enhance the precision for either of them will resolve the inconsistency. In this example, we suppose we already know that the source of inconsistency is statement 6. So when we isolate basic block 1, we will resolve the inconsistency, but if we only enhance precision for basic block 6, it doesn't. So the search will then continue within the children of basic block 1 and discard the basic block 6 subtree. In the end, we'll see that statement 6 will be, in the end, finally be isolated. The time complexity in this case is O of our log n, where n is the number of total nodes in the AST. In another example, where suppose we already know that statement 6 and 9, when they act together as the cause of inconsistencies, then neither enhancing basic block 1 nor 6 would resolve it. So we keep both parts of code in our search, and we perform bisection search on children nodes of each part. And then when we perform both halves of the search, the AST, we will isolate statement 6 and 9. The time complexity, if in an absolute worst case, let's say if the inconsistency is dense, it will be O of n. Then next we use precision enhancement to approximate real numbers to avoid inconsistency inducing conditions and minimize rounding errors caused by inconsistencies. Compared to previous state-of-the-art, SEAL supports enhancing both CPU and GPU code. That's CUDA in this case. And it also supports enhancing just a single expression within a statement, which improves the usefulness in situations where in some programs, one statement could be very long and complex. The general idea of precision enhancement is shown in the two code regions here. Is that, let's say we enhance precision for both code regions, and within each, all floating point operations will be converted into enhanced precision as float to double here. And also at the beginning and the end of the region, we convert the variables to and from enhanced precision. Also, you notice that external function called like the trigonometry functions here are all converted to an enhanced precision version if we know such versions exist. Also, SEAL detects like redundant type conversions by performing a boundary check. If we look at the magenta region here, the variables comp and t, we know that they are converted back to float and then converted back to double. So this conversion is entirely not necessary, while it will lose some of the precision in the middle. So what we do is we SEAL detected and remove such redundant type conversions. And next we'll talk about how SEAL evaluates against state-of-the-art and also in heterogeneous programs itself. So to evaluate this, we use CPU and GPU benchmark programs. We have synthetic programs generated by Verity, and also real-world applications. And apart from that, we also evaluate our tool against the previous state-of-the-art, which is P-liner, as listed here, in all x64 benchmarks from its own evaluation. For the synthetic CUDA programs, we isolated inconsistencies in 328 out of 330. We have inspected some of these inconsistencies. We have inspected all of them. And we show you some of the cases here. For example, some normal numbers, when they are used, it could be flushed to 0. No, I would say treated as 0. And also using the compiler choose to use fast approximation operations, or sometimes it involves special values such as infinite. We also tested seal on inconsistency we have found or encountered on some GPU benchmark programs and real-world applications. To trigger the inconsistencies, we try to modify the error threshold, which is a previously like an existing method to try to trigger the inconsistencies. If you're interested, you can read the paper yourself. And we found 8 such cases as shown below. For these 8 programs and the inconsistencies, seal successfully isolates the statements shown here, and also subsequently the expressions as shown on the right that cause these inconsistencies, except one, which is the LU decomposition, where we only isolated the function that caused the inconsistency, which it contains about 10 lines of code. As for Cloud SC, which is an ECMWF cloud physics mini app, we have found the cause to be a floating point type conversion in a power function call. So we already notified the issue to developers, and they have handled it on their end. Next, we compare seal against state-of-the-art, which is pliner. First, we use 50 synthetic CPU programs we already know they have inconsistencies on Intel CPU with the GCC compiler. Seal achieves overall better results than pliner, as shown in the chart below. You see the orange bar represents seal, and a higher bar represents a more finer grained isolation results. And seal performs like overwhelmingly better than pliner. Yeah. And next, we also tested seal against pliner in 3 NAS CPU benchmarks, and all of them achieves better, like either we achieve better, I would say, isolation results, as in CG.B, where we isolate the lines compared to only isolate a function of 160 lines of code. And also in cases like SP.8, both tools isolate different functions, but because this is because both are valid answers, they just pick different parts of the AST, which is also a possible scenario. So yeah, that's all from my end.
Okay.
That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Dolores. I think we probably have time for one question. Zach, do you want to ask yours?
How to unmute. Yeah, so I was super interested in the talk. One thing I was curious about is how should people who are the compiler authors use these inconsistencies to improve the compiler? It seems like a lot of these transformations most of the time are okay, but as you've shown, right, not always. So how do they work backwards from these issues to a compiler branch?
So one way that I can envision is that since we know which with the tool, we will know which expression caused the inconsistency. We can, like, as someone, like, as in my case, I would look at, for example, the IR generated by the compiler and or the binary. Like, you can clearly see, like in my examining, I could clearly see the difference between, for example, O0 or O3 with fast math, but also note that for a lot of these is, I would say, is intentional, like in fast math, because we have relaxed our standards a lot compared to IEEE. There will be cases like, oh, we do our compiler does reassociation with fast math, then this is like a side effect of reassociation. So with that, we can determine the cause, and then we can determine that if this is a bug of the compiler, or if this is intentional by enabling a certain flag. And with the flag, it will come down to the software developer themselves to determine what would be the best, if we rewrite it, or if we rewrite the source code, or if we use, like, we don't use fast math. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, great. Well, there are more questions in the Slack, but
Okay,
I'm gonna try to
I'll
move
try to
on
answer
to our
them.
next speaker, and that is Edward Misbach. So